今天讲入大乘了。这个之前我在这里说有些。
Beginning from today, we will start our class on entering the way of the great vehicle. And before that, I would like to address a few things. First of all, we will have a blackout at midnight, 12 midnight tonight, till the 29th of July, around 9 a.m. It is not a blackout just in Larangar, rather in a few counties, nearby counties. Also, Serta and some important departments, as well as the management in Serta, in Larangar, decided that the Lama's Shrine Hall, as well as Larangar's Hotel, as well as the Jomo's Shrine Hall, these three places will be temporarily supplied with electricity, but we are not entirely sure whether it is going to be in such a way, but it is the decision. During the time of blackout, in terms of internet, we had already come to terms with Telecom, and they will provide us with electricity, with the self-generated power. Well, we will have class today and tomorrow. We don't have class on Sunday. We will have the Uttara Tantra Shastra, as well as the Sutra of Great Liberation on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we will have entering the way of Great Vehicle. That's the schedule for next week. If we have a large area blackout, as I said, the internet should be fine. Also, people who live in Larangar can receive and listen to classes through radio. However, you may have to get the batteries and to charge up your battery, your electricity bank. Otherwise, you may lose the power halfway through. Some of the practitioners usually would save up the water beforehand, but I don't think it's necessary since we have a natural spring. It's called the Naga Spring over here, and as long as we have the spring here, we don't need to worry about the supply of water, or the drinking water, that is. That being said, we will not have tap water or the water supply in washrooms. After even having discussions with the associated departments, we still will not be able to have the supply of water due to the cutoff of electricity. Also, I would like to advocate to all of you to save up some water for the toilets, as well as to save up some water reservoir for your own usage, drinking water usage as well. Well, in the past, we didn't have tap water, but we lived quite fine. Back in 1985, I came to Larangar. The first electricity lamp, was installed in Larangar in 1990, and it was in the winter. For 5 years, we didn't have any tap water or any electricity in Larangar, and I lived fine for those 5 years. Also, tap water is a new thing here as well. We didn't have that before. Many of you probably take these kinds of modern, these kinds of modern inventions for granted, but we didn't have those before. Many people exerted lots of effort to provide these kinds of convenience. I hope that all of us can face these kinds of new challenges with optimism. As I said, that even without electricity, we can still enjoy a candlelight dinner. And in the West, in Europe, a candlelight dinner is considered as something quite luxurious, very classy. Especially when you look at those high-end restaurants in Europe, the restaurants tend to have very dim lighting, and then they would put up a candle. So myself included, tonight we will just lit up a candle and we'll have meals with candlelight. So for the next few days we will not have electricity, and we were informed that the 3 shrine halls will be provided with electricity only for the next few days. Also, we will not have too much water supply for the next few days. It is because of the electricity supply, so we can only have electricity provided to here from one location instead of from the national grids. Serta County also will not have electricity supply too. I hope you won't be too particular or upset about that. We will have the electricity, some electricity, also internet as well from telecom. All of them, right? From all the 3 major suppliers of internet, correct? So no electricity, no water. This is my reminder to all of you, an announcement to all of you, so you can be prepared. Tonight it is said that the entire county and all the places will not have electricity at all, and then slowly they will restore and provide electricity for the 3 main shrine halls. The hotel, the library, they'll really need electricity, but they are not able to provide electricity to so many places. So I think it's all right. We can still adapt to this situation. This is the first thing I would like to address. And then the second, through the attendance, I can see that there are many people who are interested in attending this Vajrayana class, but I think there are too many people attending. In the past, it seems that many people do not wish to come to Shrine Hall to attend the class, but today everybody shows up. Only those of you who are required to attend the class in the Shrine Hall can come to the Shrine Hall, but the rest of you can stay at home and listen to the class. For the lay practitioners, if you can attend the entire 3 months of the lectures, then you can come to the Shrine Hall and attend. Also, there are single days and the days of the odd numbers and of the even numbers, and you should take turns instead of everybody shows up at the same time. The management team, I hope that you can pay attention and actually manage the members who can attend the class. It seems that the male members are doing better in terms of management, and sometimes the female members, the female management, tend to get either too much on the extreme of being too strict and sometimes being too loose. maybe at the end of the year, I think you need to have meetings regarding to this issue. There are groups of the management team are doing fine and a group are not. Not so sure if you understand Vinaya or not. Sometimes we can see that their actions are not appropriate from time to time. For example, some practitioners should be allowed to stay at a certain residence, but the management team would not allow them to. And then not only that, their attitude tend to be quite rude as well. Also, there are some Khenpos and Khenmos who would give the management team, who would give the certain practitioners certain permissions, but then the management team would not allow them to. I hope that the management team would not be too arrogant. Yesterday, after noticing certain events, I was not quite happy about them. Some management team members would follow me wherever I would go. On some perspective, you should engage in management activities. On the other, you should really watch over your mind and do not get so haughty over your task of duties. You're here to serve the Sangha, you're here to serve the sentient beings. If you are not happy about your post, you don't necessarily have to be on that post. We would not force you to be in those posts, and we do not rely on you to be here. Being in the management post, I hope that you need to understand the principle at the same time, knowing what should be done, what could be done, and what couldn't be done. If there are people who insisted on doing things that they're not allowed to, then you can give me a name list for those people who would not follow your guidance. And if there are people who are allowed or have given permissions, then you should try to also adapt to those situations too. Being in the management post, I think it's better to not get into either of the extremes. On one hand, we do need people to enforce the rule. We do need people to also listen to the management team. That being said, we need to treat everyone with great kindness. When it comes to certain special requests and all of that, we also need to be reasonable as well. After contemplating on various aspects, I am making this announcement. Also, I've made certain decisions. There are things that we could do and there are things we couldn't this year, and I hope that you can understand. Those people who are close to the lamas or close to the teachers should especially watch over your own behavior. As a Buddhist, you shouldn't think that because you have a special close relationship to the Lama, you can beat others and you can slander others. This is not correct. Also, those of you who listen to the Vajrayana teachings, you need to understand the minimum requirement to listen to the Vajrayana teachings is that you vow not to harm any sentient beings. I am not just addressing this to the management team today. In fact, the people of various kinds of posts and of departments in the clinic, in the hotel, and so on. You need to watch over your own behavior. I think people tend to lose their sense of how to treat others whenever they are bestowed with authority. When people have certain powers, they tend to get arrogant, and then various kinds of inappropriate things and behaviors may appear. People of different departments, staff members, whenever you are enforcing the discipline, the rules, do not think of yourself as the best person in this whole wide world. Do not be so arrogant. You should think that you're also a sentient being, also a person. Though I'm sitting here on the Dharma throne, I truly understand that I cannot compare to you in various aspects. My character, my virtue, my merits, I cannot compare to many of you. Similarly, I hope that you can also contemplate in such a way that though you have some responsibilities, though you have certain powers and authorities, you should not get arrogant. Well, before the teaching of entering the way of Mahayana, I would like to address on the previous few things. It is not to say that you made some grave mistakes, it is not that, but I would like to remind you. Also, in terms of discipline, I hope you can watch over your own actions and behaviors. Do not bring bad reputation to your departments or to yourself, among others. The staff members should not simply rely on your personal relationship to others or your personal perspective and do not listen to the rule for the whole Sangha. This is something I also like to emphasize. Now let us get into entering the way of Mahayana. I will give you the oral transmission first, every day, and then continue with the class, the teaching. The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of aeons. I now see it, hear it, receive, and uphold it. I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings. Let's generate the supreme Bodhicitta. We are now going to begin our class on entering the way of the great vehicle. The method and format of giving this teaching would be different than the other Sutrayana teachings. Those of you listening to the Tibetan oral transmission or listening to the teachings given through the Mandarin Chinese, it would be the best for you to already have received Vajrayana empowerments. Also, you have to have faith to the Vajrayana teaching, to have faith to the gurus and the three jewels, and never slander all of those. Also, another requirement is that you have to fulfill the requirement, which is to finish listening to this teaching all the way from the beginning to the end, which would last for about 3 months. If you cannot fulfill all the stated above prerequisites, then it would not be beneficial for you to even start listening to this teaching. This is simply a reminder I am giving you. For those of you who can't receive the oral transmission through live teaching, then you can receive the oral transmission through Dharma teachers, Khenpo and Khenpo later on. Only those of you who are listening to this teaching live, you can receive the oral transmission. Some of you who are listening to the teaching through audio or reading transcripts, though you cannot receive the oral transmission, but you can receive blessings still. But don't worry, some of the Khenpos and Khenpos would be able to give you the oral transmissions later.
Taba Jimbu Sirlanjik Baji Shava Tanju Jigso, Taba Jimbu Sirlanjik Bamdozum Jopa, Ganzak Gantan Kor Jamsole, Taran Doja, Lanami Bishanchip, the Tripurandopa Namji, Tomar Kona, Nyomo Namjim Sanyan Lap, Tabra so, Kungashir Nyomo Namji Chang, De, Roa Nam Kori, Jamsur and Kamso, Jeep Gafshela Trapi Shiro, Tigo, the Ter Namji, Nimbur Kiro, Lam Chok the Kira, Kangim Bajik Zate. Dela Kumbra Shaver Rigso, Kungashirna Nyomo Namjim Sani Kondo Macheper, the Nimbo Kondo Chipper Menger, the Kondo Macheper, Kumbra Shavi Tap Young Machine, there Namda, Mabjurna Tari Kurku, Marnie Beef Shero, the Zamji Shisha Maliba Kondo Chipper and Yerde, Kungashirna Semchingi, Kungashirna Semgi Ramjan Cherta. Yimbadan, Sim Chirvil Nirkupdan, Sim Manchirvil Nirkupzam Shibe, Shivsha Tamjin di Bishir de Nyantu dan Ransan Digi, Shanchivar, number Jurvil go Shukchigla Kivere, Mangero. De la Numo Nam Jim Sanya Laptabra Shat and Derter, Dertava, Numoa, Jivsha Vim Sanya, this Trabaji, Yente, Tinjo Nam Chang and Jertam, Gunde, Power Chaver, Zimepa, Zimekan, Chambar Tower, no Jeraji, Yenjena. Nyomo Namner Power Shaver, Zikim Sanyan, Nepper Shiso, Chirtarjina, Derter, Nyantuji, Sirlem, Paba Rapjumba Namji, Consum di Nyumumba, Tongadam, Gumba, Power Sham, Tatak Malibar, Founder, Trapakund of Jury, Jura Tamsi the Onsa Chadner, Drapjumbim Jeva Toboji, Javanan, Derter, Drapjum Namji Power Nyumumba, Nam, Ziki, Chang. Tujik Taganar, Ziki Chang Nipper Mangero, Chirtarjina, Raging Derter. 통일 방으로 시작이 뇽몽와 남들 등으로 통일 방으로 시작아 대다거든 금정 통일 방 시작아 대다거든 제익직 연남 원들 제 타들이 요집 딱 장나 대다 제익직 연버르결나너 등으로 통일 방으로 시작아 방외 탐칠 방으로 이르되 대다는 랑점 공바 돈 메버는 여로 가르테지 타드바레 요도제나 대다는 덴바 전 시샤 말리 밤돌 디네 덴바 저 르남버 시와 잠데 자페 Yurub Demba Villa Mugbi Wonger, Panshavi, Numon, Jir, Kirva Donmazate. Testana Shisharab Yevale, Chang Nibrazonga, Met de Durter, Dungerji Demba Bajilayon, Martavatan, Dungoradan, Stonadan, Dormepi number Shiban, Dungurla, Chushi Zoba, Jibe, T. Wonger, Dungurum Tongue, Power Shava. Reregan Jirin Guru, the dog Dungur Jim Summer.
Now let us begin our class on entering the way of the great vehicle. I have received the teaching on this text, I believe the second or maybe the third year, when I came to Laronggar, 1987. It was when Ponso Rinpoche just returned from Mount Wutai. It was the fall. In fact, around then, I have not studied quite a lot yet. But when I first started studying entering the way of the great vehicle, I felt it was indeed really supreme. The content within the teaching arose great faith and devotion in my mind. After receiving the teaching, I felt that this teaching is indeed incredible and unfathomable. So ever since then, I've tried to quote from certain aspects or certain teachings from this particular text, but usually just fragments of it. Some of the metaphors, examples, and inference, I've quoted those. And I've always tried to translated and had this thought in my mind, but it was very difficult for me to translate it. The teaching, just like clear words, is quite difficult. Also, the style of Rongzom Pandita is quite different. it is rather very similar to the Indian Pandita's composition rather than the Tibetan Pandita's composition. So for those reasons, I had never really translated this particular text, although I've had such aspiration for 20 years. Back in 2019, around the end of the year, I was supposed to go to a few different countries such as Russia, Dubai, and England. A few prestigious schools invited me to give teachings, and I myself wanted to go and visit and also have certain communications and build connections with the scholars as well. But for various reasons, I was not able to travel. In fact, I was asked to stay within the province of Sichuan for 5 months. Then I thought, well, since I had that time, maybe it is the perfect time, maybe it is the maturation of causes and conditions for me to finally translate Entering the Way of the Great Vehicle. Therefore, I started to translate this particular text into Chinese language. I used about 1 to 2 months of time to finish the first draft of this particular translation. And in this year, 2021, between January to March, I've again proofread it again. So I thought to myself, it would be the best to give the teachings to you this year, because without receiving the teaching on this text, it will be difficult for you to understand it, because this is such a supreme teaching. Without anyone explaining it to you, I don't think it would be easy for you to understand the profound teachings within this text. Therefore, I think all kinds of causes and conditions had gathered for all of us to receive this teaching. Now we finally have started giving the teaching of this text. Also, I really hope that the Dharma protectors would bestow blessings to all of us, and with all of our synergy, I believe and I hope we would be able to begin this text well and finish this text well. I myself personally went to the Sangha's chanting center and made offering over there so that they would chant for all of us. But this is the dark age. As much as we try to accumulate great amount of merit, the power of the Mara is still really strong. There's lots of obstacles, possible obstacles. For example, if we do not finish receiving this teaching, maybe we could die, maybe I could die, maybe the listener or the audience could die. That would be really sad. Therefore, I supplicate to the Dharma protectors as well as the Dakinis and the deities. May they bestow us great blessings. May we fulfill our wishes of finishing this teaching altogether. And we, of course, we have to try our best as well. The other day I asked Khenpo, in saying that, have you ever heard the text called Entering the Way of the Great Vehicle? She said, no. Is it good? I said, it's really wonderful. And then she asked, is it better than the Sutra of Great Liberation? Well, I think she doesn't even know if this is an esoteric teaching or exoteric teaching yet. But I understand, because this is not a very famous teaching in mainland area. But I think this is getting more popular. Rongzom Pandita especially is getting more popular in the West. Somehow I think the Westerners tend to generate a great faith towards the non-monastics, such as Pamasambhava, Rongzom Pandita, Longchen Rabjam, and especially Jigme Limpa. They really love all the teachings given by the non-monastics. Especially when it comes to Pamasambhava's teachings, the biography, the supplication, the sadhanas of Pamasambhava, they're really popular. Maybe because Padmasambhava is as open as all the Westerners. Maybe that's why he's really popular with them, within that crowd. Anyhow, I believe Rongzom Pandita is more well known in the West than in mainland. In the Chinese language, however, there are not many information available about Rongzom Pandita. So at the beginning of our class, I will talk a little bit about Rongzom Pandita, give you a little bit of introduction about him. Rongzom Pandita, what does he look like? First of all, there are a few different tankas I will show you. This first one is very well known, included in many of the texts in the West, as well as in some of the Chinese documents as well. The second one is a painting on a mural in some famous monasteries. And the third one over here is displayed in Wikipedia. The fourth one that we see, and the fourth one is the one that we included in our particular text, is the painting that's currently exhibited in Rubin Museum in New York. I think I've given teaching over there once in Rubin Museum in New York. This is a particular painting that's painted back in the 17th century. All the paints are mineral paints. And it's a very well-known, really famous painting. There are some texts that included introduction and information about Rongzom Pandita. According to Mipa Rinpoche as well as Dudrum Rinpoche's teaching on the Nyingma Tibetan Buddhism history, where they both talked about how Rongzom Pandita lived for 119 years. Also, some great masters who give teachings in United States in the early years, in some of their teachings also talked about how Rongzom Pandita was a scholar who lived around the year 1012 to 1088, but did not say that he lived over 100 years. That's mainly talked about in the scholars. That's a kind of acknowledgement in the academia world. Some other great masters said that Rongzom Pandita lived through 1012 to 1131. But this is a little bit difficult to explain, because if he were to be born back in 1012, then the time doesn't really fit with some of the biographies of Rongzom Pandita, because it was said that Rongzom Pandita met Venerable Atisha when he was really young, and Venerable Atisha thinks that in fact recognized that Rongzom Pandita was the reincarnation of Shmurti Jnana Kirti, which was the guru of Atisha. Also, in some of the histories, it says that Rongzom Pandita was the reincarnation of Trahala Ringmo, another Pandita from India. Anyhow, it was definitely true that Rongzom Pandita at a very young age had met Venerable Atisha. Also, Rongzom Pandita used Sanskrit to debate with Venerable Atisha. In this way, then we have to cross-reference with the Atisha's time of birth and the period of time that Venerable Bodhicitta was staying in Tibet, which was between 1044 to 1055. So there's some kind of contradictory dates in terms of Rongzom Pandita's birth date. In any ways, Rongzom Pandita, in fact, is a great Pandita who lived during that period of time, that is after the long Dharma's extinction of the Dharma. He is proficient in Sanskrit and proficient in both esoteric and exoteric teachings. He said himself that while I am not a very ignorant person because I have already read all the esoteric and exoteric teachings, I am also not a very prolific person because I only read them once. That's what he said. In Tibet, we say that Rongzom Pandita has the wisdom of Dina, has the prolific listenings of Vasubandhu, also has the ability of giving teachings just like Denja Gyume. He is endowed with the ability of debating, of Dharmakirti, as well as the talents of composition of Ashvagosha. So all of those kinds of merits and eloquence are gathered on Rongzom Pandita himself. There are lots of texts that talks about the life of Rongzom Pandita. I'm not going to expound too much about it. If you are interested, I would recommend you to read into the Blue Annal, as well as the Red Annal and White Annal. Other than that, there are two close disciples of Rongzom Pandita who also composed the biography of Rongzom Pandita. Back in 17th century, Jigme Limpa also composed the biography of Rongzom Pandita, but Jigme Limpa's composition of Rongzom Pandita's biography are rather very similar to the biography that composed by the disciples of Rongzom Pandita and the description of Rongzom Pandita in Blue Annal. Dudrum Rinpoche, the author of the Nyingma Tibetan Buddhism history, he wrote a long paragraph of Rongzom Pandita's life. I've translated it before. In Beacon of Certainty, it says that the Indian Pandita Chandrakirti and the Tibetan Pandita Rongzom Pandita, both of them had established the primordial purity, great emptiness. This is what was taught in Beacon of Certainty. The Prasangika school, in fact, was not the teaching that was flourished during the early propagation time in Tibet. According to Mipa Rinpoche's commentary on ornaments of Madhyamika, he talked about the most supreme perspective of Madhyamika is similar to the view of great perfection of Nyingma. And mainly it is because both of them talks about the primordial purity. Everything is naturally pure, and all phenomena are empty, including the coming and going of mind. Whenever you're looking for it, they are still empty. For such reason, when Rongzom Pandita was alive, we know that in Tibet there was no teaching on the Prasangika view of Madhyamika. Though there was a copy of Madhyamika Avatara during the early propagation time, however, Rongzom Pandita probably didn't really read or studied Chandrakirti's teaching. But through Rongzom Pandita's wisdom, both of Rongzom Pandita's idea and Chandrakirti's idea somehow synchronized. Therefore, they both established the perspective of primordial purity and emptiness. We talked about Rongzom Pandita's teachings in the Luminous Essence teachings when we were studying it. Also, another Tantra quoted Rongzom Pandita as well. It was said that Rongzom Pandita's teachings, the complete versions of Rongzom Pandita's teachings has 60 volumes. There were lots of his compositions. So he is considered as an early Pandita in Tibetan Buddhist history. Lots of the researchers think that other than Padmasambhava, Rongzom Pandita is considered as the rather very early Panditas of the time. However, out of the 60 volumes, there are only 3 volumes that's left of Rongzom Pandita's composition. One of them is the explanation of the 3 jewels, which is a commentary of Illusory Net. It was very well known. I received the oral transmission from Khenpo Sodargye. On top of that, he also composed the commentary on the Manjushri Namasamgiti. Also, he made a commentary on Padmasambhava's teaching on the pith instruction, a commentary of pith instructions, which was also very difficult to understand. I tried to translate it as well, but it's definitely difficult. On top of that, I believe there is the teaching of the parable of Black Snake. I believe Tsochum Lodro Khenpo had to give teaching on that before. Other than entering the way of the great vehicle, which you probably had never heard before, there's in fact another title that is exactly the same with the Chinese translated title that's composed by some other masters. It was probably translated back in the North Wei dynasty or maybe North Song dynasty. That teaching was not this teaching. I just want to make that differentiation. The other teaching that's translated into Chinese was a text that talks about why the Mahayana teaching is the teaching given by the Buddha. But over here, in this particular text, it talks about Vajrayana teaching. So now let's talk about entering the way of the great vehicle. Let's look at the title. Entering the way of the great vehicle. There is the differentiation between the great vehicle and the small vehicle. And in terms of the pith instruction, in terms of generating bodhicitta, those are the categories or the teachings given in the Mahayana. But if one were not to generate bodhicitta, then that person would belong to the smaller vehicle. According to Venerable Atisha, he would talk about how the difference of generating the aspiration is really the boundary of making the great vehicle and the small vehicle. Also, great vehicle, according to the ornament of Sutra Shastra, it talks about there are 7 greatness associated with the Mahayana, that is the object and wisdom, diligence, as well as various skillful means. However, over here, it is not simply talking about the Sutrayana Mahayana teaching. In this particular text, we are going to talk about entering into the great vehicle of Vajrayana, particularly great perfection, Dzogchen. And we will be talking about great perfection in the 5th chapter, where there are the 5 greatness and the 6 bindus, and there are the various teachings quoted to establish the teaching of great perfection, especially teachings from the mind category. However, why doesn't the text say that this is entering the way of great perfection then? Some of the scholars, as well as the great masters, through their understanding and explanation, which I think it could be true, because Rongzom Pandita, through his biography, we can see that after the events of eliminating Buddha Dharma by Landharma, almost all the monastics extincted in Tibetan area. There were only a few of those yogis who can propagate the Dharma. So we can see around that period of time, it was really the turning point between the former propagation period of time and later propagation period of time of Buddha Dharma. Especially during the later part of the propagation, people started to reject all the secretive teachings such as subjugating and union practices, including even sometimes empowerments. When Atisha came to Tibet, at that time the 3rd and the 4th Abhisheka were not allowed. Also, around that time, in Tibetan areas, there were some rules that's just like the law that we have to abide. At that time, people were not allowed to receive the Vajrayana teachings. Therefore, Rongzom Pandita secretively saying that this is entering the way of the great vehicle rather than saying that this is entering the way of the great perfection. And because of his great wisdom, he started using all kinds of inference, all kinds of quoted from all kinds of sutras and teachings to establish his view, which is great perfection. Therefore, we have to understand why this is the title with the understanding of the historical background. It is because Rongzom Pandita couldn't talk too much about entering the way of Vajrayana. Therefore, he had to secretively talk about how this is entering the way of the Buddha Dharma.
密法的这个大乘，如果密法的大乘的话呢，我们先宗当中的气大呢，就是在密法当中也是，比如说这个所愿大的话。
Entering the way of the great vehicle, in certain ways we can say that this is the great vehicle of Vajrayana. In the Sutrayana, we say that there are 7 greatness, and in the Vajrayana, we would say that there is the object or the condition that is great, because this is the profound and vast tantras, also great practice, because the practice would directly lead to the perfect fruition. Great wisdom, that is the wisdom that's generated through generation stage as well as perfection stage, also the greatness of diligence, which could lead to the perfect fruition, that is enlightenment. Great skillful means, such as practicing the union practice and the subjugating practice, all kinds of skillful means. Also great activity, such as the activity of magnetizing, subjugating, and so on. Now, entering the way of the great vehicle, there are 6 chapters. However, it does not have any homage or supplication or aspiration verses. Usually, in the Tibetan tradition, at the beginning of any composition, the author would write one of the three, or two of the three, or all of the three. I think this is rather very similar to some of the Chinese masters' composition, that they don't really have any of those verses composed in a poetic way with flowery language, which is probably better because with too much flowery language, it could be confusing. Anyhow, over here, Rongzom Pandita started by saying that I am going to simply explain the meanings of entering the way of a great vehicle. I'm going to explain very simply, and I'm going to explain a little bit. Though that he said it's a little bit or simply, in fact, I don't think it was simple. His composition is simple, or he only explained a little. He used lots of logical inference to explain the reasons of entering into the way of great vehicle, which could be a little bit difficult. So I hope that you could be more attentive when you're listening to this class. It would be the best if you can attend the tutoring sessions afterwards. Otherwise, you would feel that it could get really confusing later, and you probably won't remember any of those afterwards. And then Rongzom Pandita continued to say that for those of you who want to attain liberation from the ocean of samsara, and those of you who want to practice the Supreme Bodhi, you should first of all understand and observe the characteristic of affliction. Well, the first and the foremost prerequisites for all of you who are attending this class is you have to generate the mind of renunciation, that you want to free yourself from the ocean of samsara. The mind of renunciation is crucial if you want to attain full liberation and attain the perfect fruition for the benefit of all sentient beings. We have to, first of all, generate the mind of renunciation. Some of the Dharma teachers who give teachings on taking rebirth in Pure Land, but their posters may give different information. For example, I've seen some of the posters with those masters sitting beside a beach and wearing sunglasses. It feels like they really enjoy this samsaric world, maybe because they feel the ocean is too beautiful. Anyhow, we should not grasp onto samsara or the saha world. We should first generate the mind of renunciation. Secondly, we also have to generate the mind of bodhicitta. We have to generate the aspiration of attain the full fruition of liberation, the perfect fruition for the benefit of sentient beings. Then for this group of people who generated renunciation and generated bodhicitta, then this group of practitioners should observe the characteristic of affliction. Let it be the 3 poisons, the 5 poisons, however you name it. What is the characteristic of affliction? Everyone over here, you're attending this class, then it must mean that you want to attain liberation. Because if you don't even want to attain liberation, you won't be here to listen to the class. And for those of you who want to attain liberation, you have to know what you're attaining liberation from, which is affliction, and then you have to know the characteristic of affliction. In the common vehicle, they also talk about how it is because of the fetters of affliction the sentient beings are wandering in the ocean of samsara. All of the vehicles, the esoteric, exoteric, Mahayana, Hinayana, all of those common vehicles, the sutras and shastras talk about how the sentient beings only wander in the ocean of samsara because of fetters of affliction. Of course, other different religions, they have different opinions. They would say that we are living in this imperfect world because of Mahashvara, or because of God, or because of so and so. How's my volume? Am I getting too excited today? I'm getting very enthusiastic because of the teaching, I think. Now, Rongzom Pandita firstly talked about why we should firstly observe affliction, because over here it says that through any of the vehicles within Buddhist studies, within Buddhism, all the vehicles talk about how afflictions are the fetters which binds us within samsara. So we should understand and observe the characteristic of affliction, and then we would be able to look for the supreme path and the supreme methods to work with afflictions, and then we can practice those methods. First of all, we need to know what is the characteristic of affliction, and then we need to see, oh, this is the affliction of grasping, and what is the corresponding method to work with the grasping. It is just like how if you're ill, you have to know what the illness is, and then you can look for the corresponding prescriptions that could cure your illness. If you don't even know what illness it is, then how could you look for medicine that cures it? This is also taught in Uttara Tantra Shastra. That is why over here Rongzom Pandita says that the sentient beings, because they do not understand the characteristic of affliction, therefore they have not been liberated from the ocean of samsara yet. That is to say, for example, if you were to have some illness with your gallbladder, but if you do not know that you have gallbladder illness, then how could you look for the cure for it? How could you find the antidote? So if you do not know the characteristic of affliction, how could you find the antidote for affliction? How could you know the methods of working with the afflictions? In that way, it doesn't matter how much you practice, if you do not know what illness it is, if you do not know the characteristic of affliction, whatever kinds of diligent activities and practice you engage in, it could only part you from liberation. Let it be esoteric or exoteric teachings. If a person have not parted from affliction, then that person does not have any opportunities to attain liberation. That is from the other aspect. From the common aspect speaking, once you understand what affliction is, then you have to know its antidote. After you know its antidote, then you have to engage in diligent practice. After engaging in diligent practice, then you will be able to part from afflictions. And after parting from affliction, you will attain affliction. This is the step-by-step system of attaining liberation. So you have to eradicate affliction through knowing its antidote, which is really the key. I really hope that you can contemplate upon that. And then Rongzom Pandita said that simply knowing all of this, you would be able to attain the understanding of all the knowable. Simply understanding all of those stated above, then we will be able to attain the understanding of all the knowables, of all the phenomena. If you were to know the characteristic of affliction, of antidote, of practice, of the methods, and of the way, and then practice to part from afflictions, then you would be able to attain liberation. After studying all of those, then all the knowables are attained. Of course, out of all the knowables, in terms of building any kinds of airplanes and all of the weapons and so on, those are meaningless things to a practitioner. But if you were to understand what affliction is and knowing the antidote, then you will be able to practice on it, and then that's all the knowables that you need to obtain. After that, even if you don't understand the 5 treatises, if you have not studied the 5 treatises, that's okay still. People would probably feel that, well, then I don't need to study it, right? But that is not what I'm saying. Otherwise, all the Dharma teachers who give teachings to all of you on the five treatises, they must be really upset with me if I were to say that you don't need to study those anymore. They would feel that their efforts are spent in vain, and they would probably feel quite upset with me. So I was just simply kidding. Now, to continue, Rongzom Pandita said that simply by knowing the nature of mind at the stage of being confused and at the stage of not being confused, then that aspect has already included all the knowables. We have to know afflictions, which is simply our mind, because when the mind is confused, it becomes affliction. When it is afflicted, in fact, it has. When it is not afflicted, that is the nature of mind, that is true wisdom. So there are three stages. That is the stage of the nature of the mind, and the second stage, which the mind is confused, which is fettered by anger, by greed, by ignorance, and then the third stage, which is already defettered and unfettered from all of those confusion, which is the stage of attaining liberation. So the foundation, path, and fruition are also included in all of the three stages. Simply put, when we're studying entering the way of the great vehicle, we are simply recognizing what affliction is, and then eradicate affliction, and then at the end we attain liberation from the afflictions. While studying this teaching talks about attaining fruition, which is different than the kind of liberation that is taught according to the Shravaka or Pratika Buddhist tradition. Because the Shravakas or the Pratika Buddhas, they would attain the so-called nirvana that falls into an extreme still. There is still an extreme of attaining nirvana, attaining peace. However, according to the Vajrayana tradition, there is no extreme that's attached to the nirvana. That is why in Bodhisattva Charyavatara talks about we need to rely upon the wisdom of no self to eradicate all the obscurations of the knowables. In summary, the previous part talks about why it is important to observe the characteristic of affliction. It is not that we simply blindly develop a faith to believe in whatever the Buddha said, the Bodhisattva said, and then we'll blindly develop faith in all of their proclamation. It is not like that at all. We have to rely upon our own wisdom to observe the affliction's characteristic. And then how to observe it? Let's look at the further description. From the opponent, if someone were to ask, well, the so-called characteristic of the affliction, does it have an entity? Does it have an entity that fetters the sentient beings? Or does it not have any entity at all? So the question is that, well, the sentient beings, according to, for example, the realism school, they all hold on to there's an entity that fetters all the sentient beings' mind stream, just like they are fettered by handcuffs and chains. So the first question is that, do afflictions actually have entities that bound the sentient beings, or without any entities, however, it appears to have the function that bound the sentient beings, the later one, which belongs to the Sautrantika and Prasangika school, which is really the Madhyamika's point of view. Now, to answer this particular question, in fact, the answer include twofold. One is to respond to the question by negating the opponent's idea, also to establish one's own opinion. Over here, Rongzom Pandita says that if you were to say, if you were to ask that, do afflictions have entity? The answer is no. My particular translation over here does not mark the answer is. In the later part, if the actual text does include the answer is, I translated according to the actual text. But over here, it does not say that the answer is that afflictions do not have entities. I did not translate the answer is because it is not included in the text. But if the opponent were to ask, well, how could you say that there is no actual existent entity to afflictions? How could you say that? I think it's really wonderful. The explanation is really wonderful for those of you whom can engage in thorough study of entering the way of the great vehicle, and if you can develop some insights and wisdom through this particular text, the inference would definitely help you to understand that afflictions do not have any entity. Therefore, you do not need to fear about afflictions at all. Of course, when it comes to practice, you do need to familiarize yourself with that teaching. However, the inference is really wonderful. Now, step by step, we will negate the points of view from Shravakas, from mind-only school, and from Madhyamika, the Sautantrika Madhyamika's perspective. In fact, the Prasangika Madhyamika school is very similar to our own school of perspective, especially when it comes to the primordial purity. According to Beacon of Certainty, it says that the great Madhyamika that is devoid of any elaboration is really the same with the great perfection that is luminous. They only uphold different titles. From the point of view of emptiness, in fact, the two are not different. This is stated in the Beacon of Certainty. So from a certain aspect, the Prasangika school and the Great Perfection's point of view are very similar, particularly when it comes to the aspect of devoid of any elaborations. Now let's look at the Shravaka system. According to the Shravaka system, one is said to have attained the fruit of an arhat once one has rid oneself of the whole of the three realms of afflictions by means of the path of seeing and the path of meditation, having hereby severed all the fetters of conditioned existence. When we studied Abhidharma, we already studied that the Shravakas, or the practitioners at the time of attaining the fruit of Arhat, in fact, they have already eradicated all the afflictions through the path of seeing and meditation. They have already severed all the afflictions of the three realms. To say that all the afflictions have already been severed, then that is to say that there must be existence of afflictions. That is how the practitioners can attain arhathood, because they have already eradicated all of those afflictions. Now here's the response from Rongzom Pandita. He said that, well, the afflictions that's being eliminated by the arhats, if they are truly existent, then what are the numbers that's associated? For example, how many? That is to say, how many afflictions have they eradicated? Can you come up with a number? Of course, according to the Mahayana and the Hinayana teachings, there are different numbers associated to the afflictions. According to Abhidharma, it says that there are 88 associated to the path of seeing and 10 associated to the path of meditation. Altogether, they are 98. According to entering the gate of wisdom, it says that there are 112 associated to the path of seeing and 414 associated to the path of practice. According to the Hinayana's point of view, there are 98 associated to the path of seeing. Whatever the numbers may be, in fact, there is no entity according to Rongzom Pandita. Why is that? Now we've already learned that according to the Shavaka school, according to the Hinayana, they say that there are 98, and Mahayana, they say that there are hundreds more. But then how could you say that they do not have any entities if we already come up with numbers? Let us examine in such a way, out of all the afflictions that's associated to the path of seeing, the truth of suffering and the truth of accumulation of suffering and so on, all of those kinds of afflictions that's associated to each of them, do they uphold one entity or do they uphold separate entities? If it is of one entity, then it is to say after eradicating one particular entity that's, for example, associated to the path, to the truth of suffering, then you can eradicate all of the other sufferings. Then what's the point of practicing on the other path at all? So what do you say? Do you have one entity of all the afflictions that's associated to the Four Noble Truths, or do all of those different afflictions uphold different entities? Because each of the Noble Truths, in fact, they also associate to the different realm. That's the realm of desire, realm of form and formlessness. So do they all uphold different entities, or do they uphold one entity? To further examine that, if they were to uphold one entity, then all of the 88 kinds of afflictions that's associated to the path of seeing can be, if you were to eradicate one of the 88, then you eradicated all of the afflictions. Because you already acknowledge that it is of one entity, then if you were to eradicate any one of them, since they uphold one entity, then you eradicated all of them. Then what's the point of treading onto the other path by practicing the other Noble Truth? If you can just practice one of the Noble Truth, and then you will be able to eradicate all of them. Of course, I think this is really profound and very deep. You probably would feel very delighted in hearing such a profound teaching. Because if the teaching is profound, you would feel really wonderful. The Hinayana, in fact, they do not come to such kind of they do not admit that this is their understanding. They would say that there are the 5 types of afflictions that need to be eradicated, and there are the 4 types that can be eradicated through the path of seeing, and 1 through meditating. In this way, that is to say, if you eradicated 1 of the 4, then you've already eradicated all of the 4. Then what's the point of practicing on it at all? But of course, that is not how they would consider their teaching at all. This negation is from the perspective of negating the afflictions have one entity. Now, to say that there are different entities associated to the Four Noble Truths, then the Four Noble Truths that can eradicate the different aspects of afflictions can further be divided into more numbers of afflictions. It is to say that if you were to say that there are different entities of affliction, we can summarize all of the knowables into the Four Noble Truths, which is suffering, accumulation of suffering, cessation, and the path of suffering. In that way, all of the afflictions can be divided into 4. If you were to say that all of the afflictions that need to be eradicated are separate, they are of different and separate entities, then all of the afflictions can be divided into 4. In this way, there would be infinite numbers associated to the categories of afflictions. That is to say, out of the Four Noble Truths, according to the teachings of the Shravakas, the five aggregates can be included in the truth of suffering. So, for example, the vase is also one aspect of suffering because it's part of the 5 aggregates. The mind that perceives the vase is also one aspect of the truth of suffering. In terms of the vase, it can be divided into the vase that's located in 4 directions of the 3 types of different materials such as gold, silver, and wood, or that belongs to different beings such as celestial beings, nagas, and human beings, and so on. So in terms of the knowables that's associated to the Four Noble Truths, it can be divided into innumerable aspects. Then, even in terms of the truth of suffering, there could be infinite numbers that can be divided into different aspects. Therefore, the different sufferings can be divided into infinite numbers as well. If the sufferings afflictions that's associated to the truth of suffering cannot be eradicated, then how could you say that the other path can eradicate the afflictions? Therefore, even the suffering itself, understanding the impermanent suffering, emptiness, and selflessness, which is the suffering, the dharma, the wisdom, and patience, all of those can be further divided into 4. In this way, the truth of suffering itself has to be understood from the aspect of impermanent suffering, emptiness, selflessness, and suffering, the nature of it or the characteristic of it. Also, the similar aspects that's associated to all of the different aspects, which would be incredibly difficult to divide those kinds of afflictions into different numbers. Because let's look at it. When it comes to the truth of suffering, it can further divide into the 4 aspects. For example, let's take vase and look at the 4 aspects of the vase, which is the suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and selflessness. Out of impermanence itself, which we're just talking about the vase of the east, of the west, of the different colors of for example, taking the color, it could be the different color of the east and different colors of the west and of the south and so on. So it can be further divided into infinite numbers of aspects. And we're simply just talking about the truth of suffering still. We haven't really getting into the other aspects of the Four Noble Truths yet. Then that means if we were to take afflictions as they have different entities, we are to say that there are infinite numbers of afflictions. So at this time, the opponent has to come to the agreement that afflictions, if we were to eradicate it, we cannot say that afflictions have one entity or different entities. Because by saying that if they are one entity, then it doesn't really correspond with the teaching that you can practice on the Four Noble Truths. If you were to say that there are different entities, then you were to say that there are infinite numbers of entities, though that the Hinayana talks about 88 types of afflictions that's associated to the path of seeing and 10 associated to the path of meditating. But those are just simply the particular proclamation made by the Sravaka school. However, it is not practical when it comes to the real examination of the understanding at all. When we're studying entering the way of the great vehicle, you have to think that, well, I've always thought to myself that I have so much afflictions, I have such heavy and such great deal of afflictions. There must be entities that's associated to afflictions. Without it, then how could you say that I have lots of afflictions or I have lots of or a great deal of them? Of course, from the worldly people, to comply with their way of talking, of saying, and of thinking, we can say that, yes, this person has lots of afflictions. However, when it comes to the teaching of Rongzom Pandita, especially in front of his wisdom, we have to understand that there is really no entity associated to affliction. Affliction does not have any entity. After studying this, I really hope that everyone would be able to understand that there is no affliction after all.
Zhubun Tsonen Zhova Zhuru